I've come across this interesting article that actually puts it into black and white that as the unfolding of the repercussion of this awful announcements from Trump on Wednesday this week on imposing a whole heap of tariffs, blanket wide tariffs over the 198 trading partners around the world, we are starting to see there is that light at the end of the tunnel. So it's not all doom and gloom, bad news as the bloodbath continues. No, there is signs of hope and optimism at the end of this dark tunnel. And what do I mean by this is that Bitcoin is starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel, i.e. decoupling itself from financial markets, whether it's NASDAQ, S&P 500 or Dow Jones, as the US stocks continue to crumble. Now, the immediate aftermath of the Wednesday's awful announcement by Trump is within 24 hours alone have actually lost more than $1 trillion US overnight. And this is just day one. And unfortunately, as these tariffs still continue to be enacted by the Trump administration, we're going to be seeing more bloodbath to come. I don't think we're going to see the bottom end of this bloodbath at all. Predominantly the US stocks, but it's fair to say that given that we are continue to live in this globally interconnected world, the countries and major indices and markets are witnessing the same sort of bloodbath. Now, of course, Trump has this magic wand and can easily revert this decision overnight if he so chooses, but I doubt he's going to do that anytime soon because he's using this as a bargaining chip to get what he wants. So this is all the more reason why leading assets like Bitcoin is to position it away from TradeFi, away from the shenanigans of these politicians and these numbskulls, in my own personal opinion. They're doing more harm than good for what the voters have originally voted in the person to do with, right? Okay, there's always been talks about there's going to be tariffs, but I don't think no one, not even economists, have ever envisaged or expected to see the magnitude of the damage from these tariffs, as we are seeing now, unfortunately. So what I'm trying to say is, if you go back to the charts, which I'll show you in a moment, we are seeing this decoupling effect, thank God, of Bitcoin, where over time it will be the testing bed or the testing period for Bitcoin to be the last one laughing, as the rest of the equity stocks are unfortunately continuing to crumble. So this is actually great news, and I've said in the outset of today's episode, we should treat this certainly as signs of hope and optimism that is not all doom and gloom for investors, and Bitcoin is going to be that savior that's going to take us away kind of doomsday policies enacted by politicians. It's going to slowly become more decoupled from these TradeFi world, where it always should be, right? I mean, the invention of how Bitcoin came to be is an asset by the people for the people. It was never meant to be under the clutches of the few or the collective, if you use the words from Saylor himself. If you go to the trading view charts I'm going to show you next, you understand what I mean. I'm actually looking at the trading view Bitcoin chart price at the moment. Now you can see within the past, if I just zoom out a bit, right, so just zoom in again so I can give you precisely the moment of the announcement, which was Wednesday 2nd, right. Now you can see what's happening here. This is Wednesday 2nd. Let's move in to the Eastern time of 9 p.m, which is pretty much the time of which Trump dropped the bombshell announcement, the tariff announcement. You can see the red candlestick at that moment where he made the announcement of that famous board chart, which is quite grotesque in the way he's actually deliberated these announcements, taking the mick, what I would call it in plain English. Now you can see this red candlestick, which means there's been a drop in Bitcoin price, at least from $86,500 to just under $80,000 mark. And that's just for Bitcoin. If you compare that with other leading stocks, you can see that the actual disparity in terms of price drops on the Magnificent Seven stocks and the broader stocks at large, whether it's the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, or the Dow Jones, they have seen actually larger price drops in those equity stocks. Not so much the case of Bitcoin, even though there's been that 6,000 to 7,000 price drop within 24 hours. after the announcement made, you can see it's actually hovered back up to recovery halfway through that loss. So instead of 7,000 and it stopped there, it's actually recovered 50% of the loss, which isn't too bad. And that's why I'm trying to explain the optimism factor. This is actually very, very significant and pivotal. You can treat this moment of discovery of a brand new trade in Bitcoin characteristic. Now, we've always been waiting, not hopeful. It's just a matter of when we're going to see that final decoupling of Bitcoin asset class from the TradeFi markets. It has always been the last milestone hurdle in which to achieve for Bitcoin, because as you recall, Bitcoin is actually being brought about by the people for the people, not for the elites, and certainly not for the capital markets, and certainly not for those huge equity stocks and companies that operate within the traditional finance markets. Bitcoin is very different in that it's decentralized and is meant to escape from the TradeFi and have its own decentralized financial model. That is what I mean by the actual decoupling effect from TradeFi. So you have to take the good from the bad. And during these times of high rates of volatility, high rates of uncertainty, and so on in the traditional financial markets arena, globally speaking, we are seeing that in the case of Bitcoin, it's not that bad, right? As I'm showing you here, these are live report feeds of the Bitcoin price chart, and it's not that bad. And you can see, in fact, as we speak, it's slightly recovering up towards the 60% loss recovery if you compare it from the moment that Trump dropped the bombshell announcement. Now it's hovering back up to 60% rather than staying at 100% loss. What I'm trying to say here is we are testing that new decoupling characteristic of Bitcoin away from its traditional finance, which has always been unique about Bitcoin value proposition. And this is the optimism that I want to bring it to your attention, which is all the more reason if you have seen all of my videos within the Bitcoin playlist, because I have several playlists, one of which is to do with Bitcoin and another one to do with blockchain, real assets tokenization, which is for me the next wave or the key wave of blockchain technology, which I encourage you to subscribe to my channel so you can actually review those videos at greater length in your own time and leisure. So the Bitcoin decoupling characteristic is starting to play out during these days where it's testing itself, so that we've always been waiting for to happen. I can see that it is unraveling itself in that direction. The Bitcoin is going to become slowly but surely detaching itself away from the clutches of TradeFi, which I want to kind of leave with you. This is for me the definitive moment. Now, if you look at the markets at the moment, there are still huge drops, but what is interesting to see as well, for those over 100 publicly registered companies in the US who've actually started to follow the strategy playbook. It was formerly known as MicroStrategy, but now it's called Strategy, which is led by Michael Saylor's team. And thanks to his ingenuity, it couldn't have come at a better moment. What do I mean by this? Is for the companies who have adopted Bitcoin in its corporate treasury, so they're issuing debt, corporate debt, in which to accumulate and buy more Bitcoins into their corporate treasuries. These are the ones that are kind of weathering the storm if you compare with the rest of the equities out there who haven't actually adopted the Bitcoin standard in its corporate treasury. So by doing this, you can see, if you look at MicroStrategy, you can see it's quite synonymous with how Bitcoin underlying is performing. It's quite synonymous in that MicroStrategy, or strategy I should say, have adopted Bitcoin standard, and as a result we are seeing the results, right? It's not encountering these billion-dollar losses where the rest of the other companies who are listed on the stock exchange, who haven't actually followed this strategy playbook example of adopting Bitcoin in its corporate treasury reserve, well, you can see they're becoming more immune to these weather storms that we are seeing at the moment. And this is the definitive news, where Bitcoin is becoming slowly but surely decoupling itself from TradeFi in its own decentralized realm. So I want you just to use this moment to actually buy into Bitcoin, hodl it, be courageous and strong, forget the noise, is my advice, and hold it on to the long term. Because if you do this, as we're seeing now with these Bitcoin standard companies who've actually adopted the same strategy, you're going to be reaping the rewards. And there's a saying, who laughs last, laugh the loudest, which is going to be you and I. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have, please don't forget to hit the like button, to share the video to other like-minded friends and colleagues at work. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly publish some interesting videos such as these, anything to do with Bitcoin, blockchain technology, and the future of finance. So till next time.